Get ready for a case that looks like, at first glance, a pretty simple love triangle, but turns out to be something much darker. We're diving into the Costa Mesa murders from 2010, and, well, this one's heavy, just as a heads up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case, from a psychological perspective. It's not just about like what happened, but also why, right? Like what were the motivations of the people involved?
So, what happened back in Costa Mesa in 2010?
So it's about two young people who were murdered, Sam Hare and Julie Kibushi. And it all starts with Julie visiting Sam's apartment late one night. And she gets like these frantic texts from him saying he needs her to come over alone.
Okay, that's creepy already. So, what happened when she got there?
Well, the last anyone heard from Julie was a text to her brother saying that she got to Sam's and could hear him crying. Then, the next day, Sam's dad, Steve Hare, he finds Julie's body in Sam's apartment. And it was staged to look like a sexual assault.
So, the killer was trying to throw off the cops. Who did they think did it?
Well, with how the scene was set up, they immediately thought it was Sam, especially since he was, like, gone. Plus, there was this message on Julie's back. It said, all yours, F you. Seemed like a personal thing, maybe a crime of passion.
Right, right. Okay, so tell me about Sam. Was there anything that, suggested he could do something like that?
Well, Sam had served in Afghanistan in the army,
Mm.
and he was dealing with PTSD. He was trying to get his life back together. But he had actually been acquitted of murder before in a similar case. It was tough for a lot of people who knew him to believe he could be responsible for this, though.
Wait, hold on. Acquitted of murder? What do you mean?
So back in 2002, Sam was accused of, like, setting up a friend to be killed by a gang. The prosecution thought Sam knew what was going to happen, but the jury said not guilty, meaning they weren't sure enough he was guilty.
Okay, so this older case throws a wrench into things, doesn't it? How did the investigators deal with that?
Well, it was a big deal for them. Like, was it just a weird coincidence or, part of a pattern? And that's where the investigation took a turn, you could say.
Okay, I'm hooked now. What happened?
So they started looking closely at the people in Sam's life. One guy who seemed helpful at first was his neighbor, Daniel Wonjak. Daniel told the police that he had seen Sam leave with some guy wearing a black baseball cap on the day of the murder.
That seems like a good lead. Did they ever find the guy?
Well, as things went on, Daniel's story started falling apart. Remember, he was an aspiring actor, so like good at storytelling, playing roles,
You think he was messing with the investigation? Why did the detective start to suspect him?
They found out Daniel was using Sam's stolen debit card in some credit card scheme. He had this teenager, Wesley, withdrawing money from Sam's account for him. It was clear Daniel wasn't being honest, to put it mildly.
Okay, so he's lying about the guy with Sam and stealing from him. What did they do when they confronted him about it?
Well, eventually he admitted to driving Sam out of town after the murder. He said Sam confessed to killing Julie and asked for help getting away. But, the details were fuzzy, and his story kept changing. The investigators started thinking he was hiding something way worse.
Sounds like they were right. What was he really up to?
This is where it gets crazy. Daniel confessed to killing both Sam and Julie.
Wow, I did not see that coming, so he did it all.
Yep. It was a messed up confession, showed how much he was lying and how brutal he was. Really disturbing stuff.
So why? Why would he do that?
He said it was all about money and insanity. I kid you not. He wanted to steal Sam's savings to, fix his own money problems and pay for a fancy honeymoon with Rachel. But, come on, that's way too simple to explain how cruel and planned out it all was.
I know, right? Two people dead, families destroyed, all for money. Doesn't make sense. What about the insanity part?
That's where things get tricky. We can't really diagnose him, not being doctors and all. But the way he acted and what he said definitely pointed to some serious problems.
What do you mean?
Well, we talked about him laughing while he was, dismembering Sam's body. But there's more. He was a pathological liar, always messing with people. He even stole from his own family. So, it wasn't just about the money, It seemed like he actually liked the lying and having power over people.
And don't forget the searches he made online, like how to hide a body and
Yeah.
quick ways to kill people. He wasn't just messing around. It's like he was obsessed with violence and death before the murders even happened.
Exactly. Those searches and all the other stuff he did show how much he planned this and how messed up his view of reality was. It wasn't just about wanting money.
It's like looking into the mind of like a seriously messed up person, right?
Right.
It's scary. It makes you wonder if anyone could seen it coming. Like, were there any signs people missed?
That's the saddest part of these cases.
Hmm.
We only see the signs after something bad has already happened. With Daniel, there were signs, the manipulating, the stealing, the creepy stuff he was into, but people didn't put it all together, not until it was too late.
Makes you wonder what could have been done, you know? Like, could anyone have stopped it?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot with true crime. We can't change what happened, but maybe we can learn from it, right?
Hmm.
By seeing the signs of violence, being more careful in our communities, helping people who are struggling, maybe we can stop this kind of thing from happening again.
It's like we all have to do our part to keep each other safe. But even if we try our best, some cases, like this one, leave you with more questions than answers, right?
Right. The Costa Mesa murders, it's not a case with an easy answer. It shows us that darkness can be hidden anywhere, even in seemingly normal people. And it reminds us that even with confessions and convictions, sometimes finding real justice is really hard.
This deep dive has been, well, intense, to say the least. We've been through the facts, the trials, the unanswered questions, the psychology of the killer. So for our listeners, what's the takeaway?
Well, it's a reminder to be careful. The world can be a dangerous place, but it also makes you want to be more aware, more compassionate, and to speak up if you see something that seems wrong. We might never completely understand why people do terrible things, but we can try to make a world where it happens less. Right.
Thank you for taking us through this. It's been a well, an eye-opening experience.
Of course. If there's one thing I hope people remember, it's this. Be kind to each other. Pay attention to the people around you. And never forget that every choice we make can change someone's life, whether it's good or bad. Okay, let's talk about Rachel and Tim. They make this whole thing even more complicated.
Right, Rachel was Daniel's fiance. Right. So where does she fit in?
Well, her story didn't add up from the beginning. Like,
Mhm.
the stuff she told the police was all over the place. And the way she acted after the murders was kind of strange.
Like, what do you mean? What made her seem suspicious?
So, this jazz singer named Chris, he had lent Daniel some money. And he told the cops he saw Sam at Daniel and Rachel's place just a few hours before he was killed.
Yeah.
And get this, he said Rachel was giving Daniel this, like, glare, you know, like there was some tension going on, maybe because Sam was there.
Interesting. So maybe Rachel knew something was up and they were being evicted, right?
Mm,
Hard to believe she didn't know they were having money troubles.
exactly. And then there's this Facebook message she sent Julie, just an hour before Julie was murdered. The message itself was weird, especially with the timing. It makes you think she knew more than she was letting on.
Wait, what did the message say? We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, so they haven't released the exact words,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But the fact that it was sent right before Julie died and that the investigators thought it was suspicious definitely adds to the mystery around Rachel's role in all of this.
It's like a puzzle where some pieces are missing. What about that phone call you mentioned earlier? The one between Daniel and Rachel when he was in jail. What was so weird about it?
Okay, so Rachel knows they're recording the call, right? But she still seems to be trying to protect Daniel, even telling him to stop lying. It's really strange, especially with how serious the crimes were.
Yeah, you have to wonder what she was thinking. Was she worried about him, or was it more about saving herself?
It's a question a lot of people had, especially the families of Sam and Julie. It's hard to believe she had no idea what Daniel did.
So what happened to her? Did they charge her with anything?
They did. They charged her with 2 felonies, being an accessory to murder after the fact.
Can you break that down for me? What does that actually mean?
Basically, they were saying she helped Daniel hide the crimes after they happened, even though she didn't actually kill anyone herself. It could be stuff like lying to the police, hiding evidence, helping him escape.
And what's the punishment for that?
It depends on the crime, really. But in this case, Rachel was looking at a lot of time in prison if they found her guilty.
So what happened?
Well, she said she was innocent the whole time. But the jury didn't believe her. In November 2018, they found her guilty and sentenced her to 2 years and 8 months. She got credit for time she had already served, and the last 6 months would be on probation.
2 years and 8 months. Doesn't seem like much for, 2 people being murdered.
Yeah, the families thought the same thing. They were sure Rachel knew more than she said, and that she made their pain worse by not coming forward sooner.
Did the families get to say anything to Rachel when she was sentenced?
They did. Sam's dad, Steve, told her she made their grief last longer by keeping quiet. He said she could have saved Julie if she had told someone what Daniel was planning.
Oh, man. That's heavy. And what about Julie's mom?
Her mom, Junko, asked Rachel straight up if she felt any remorse for what she did. And Rachel's answer was just cold. She said, no, none.
Wow. So it sounds like we're still left with a lot of questions about what Rachel knew and how she was involved.
Absolutely. And then there's Daniel's brother, Tim. He was part of the cover-up too, remember?
Right. The police found the gun and other evidence with him. What was his excuse?
He said he didn't know anything about the murders and that Daniel just gave him the stuff without saying why. But like with Rachel, his story didn't quite add up.
What do you mean?
Remember when Steve said he saw Tim at the pizza place where they used Sam's debit card? That makes you think he was more involved with Daniel than he admitted.
So what did they charge Tim with?
Same as Rachel, accessory after the fact.
Yeah.
But his case went a different way.
Oh, what happened?
He made a deal with the prosecution, a plea deal. He said he was guilty, and in exchange, they gave him a lighter sentence.
What did he get?
Only 10 days in jail, probation, and anger management classes.
10 days? Seriously? He had the murder weapon.
Yeah, the families were furious about that. They felt like he got off easy, even though he helped Daniel hide the murders.
I can see why they'd feel that way. It's like the justice system is more worried about getting things done quickly than figuring out the truth and holding everyone responsible.
Yeah, it makes you think about how complicated the justice system is and how these plea deals don't always feel fair, you know.
This whole case feels so unfair. Not just for Sam and Julie, but for their families too. They're the ones who have to live with this, and they still have so many unanswered questions.
You're right. And there's one more thing to talk about, something that makes this whole thing even more complex. Daniel got the death penalty, but will they actually execute him?
That's a good point. California has that moratorium on the death penalty, right? What does that mean for Daniel?
Well, he's on death row, but he might never actually be executed. California stopped executions back in 2006, and they haven't said if or when they'll start again. There are lawsuits and stuff, but for now, no one's getting executed.
So he's just waiting to see what happens with the law. What about the families? How do they feel about all this?
It's been really hard for them. They feel like the system failed them, first with the plea deals for Rachel and Tim, and now with this uncertainty around Daniel's sentence.
It must be so painful. Their loved ones were murdered, and now they have to deal with all this legal stuff and the possibility that the killer might not face the ultimate punishment.
And it gets worse. In 2019, the governor, Newsom, he basically put all executions on hold, so that delayed things even more. And then in 2021, they moved Daniel to a lower security prison, part of some pilot program.
Wait, what? Lower security? But he killed 2 people.
I know, right? The families were outraged. They felt like Daniel was being rewarded while they were the ones suffering.
It's hard to imagine getting that news. Finding out that the person who murdered your child is in a, nicer prison now.
It was awful for them.
Yeah.
Sam's dad, Steve, said it felt like a punch in the gut when he found out. And he didn't even hear from the authorities. He heard it from some blogger who was talking to Daniel. Like, the system betrayed them again.
This case is just layers of crazy, you know? The murders, the cover-up, the trials, the plea deals, and now this death penalty thing.
It shows how complicated the justice system can be and how hard it is to get justice for victims and their families. But there's one more thing we need to look at, something really important. We need to talk about Daniel Wonjek's mind. What made him do this? What kind of person could do something like this?
Yeah, it's tough to imagine the level of planning and just pure cruelty in this case. So, what about Daniel's mind? What can you tell us about him? What makes someone capable of something like this?
You know, that's the question everyone has, especially the detectives. They spend so much time trying to get inside the head of a killer. But sometimes, even with all the evidence and stuff, you just can't fully understand what drives a person to do things like this.
It's chilling to hear him describe the murders in his confession, so cold, no emotion, almost like he's talking about something totally ordinary, you know? Not like he took 2 lives.
I know, right?
Okay.
It shows a complete lack of empathy, like he doesn't care at all about the pain he caused. And remember, he actually laughed while he was talking about cutting up Sam's body. That's seriously messed up.
Okay, but why? What was his motive?
He kept saying it was money and insanity. Like, he admitted he wanted to steal Sam's money so he could fix his own financial problems and pay for a fancy honeymoon with Rachel. But that's way too simple, isn't it? It doesn't explain the level of cruelty and how much he planned this all out.
Exactly. 2 people are dead, families are devastated, and it's all for money. I don't buy it. What about the insanity part? What does that even mean?
Well, it's complicated. We can't really diagnose him, obviously, but the way he acted, what he said, it all suggests some serious mental issues.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, well, we already talked about him laughing about dismembering the body, but there's more. This guy was a pathological liar, constantly manipulating people. He even stole from his own family. It wasn't just about the money. He seemed to actually enjoy tricking people and having control over them.
And we can't forget those online searches he did, right? The ones about hiding bodies and killing people quickly. He wasn't just curious, he was like fascinated with violence and death. And that was before he even murdered anyone.
You got it. Those searches, along with all the other stuff, show us how much he thought about this, how twisted his mind was. It wasn't just about needing money, it was something much darker.
It's terrifying to think about. It makes you wonder if anyone could have stopped it.
It's one of those things, we only see the warning signs after something terrible happens. Daniel, he had red flags, manipulating people, stealing, being into creepy stuff. But no one really connected the dots, not until it was too late.
I guess it makes you think about what we could have done differently, right? Like, if someone had intervened, could it have changed things?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot in these true crime stories. Sadly, we can't go back in time. But maybe, just maybe, we can learn from it. If we're more aware of those warning signs, if we look out for each other, if we support people who are struggling, maybe we can prevent this kind of horror from happening again.
It's a reminder that we all have a part to play in keeping each other safe. But even when we try our best, there are cases, like this one, that leave us with more questions than answers.
That's true. The Costa Mesa murders, it's a case that's hard to understand. It forces us to look at the dark side of human nature. And it shows us that even with a confession and a conviction, sometimes real justice feels impossible.
This deep dive, well, it's been a lot to process. Shock, sadness, anger, just a lot of unsettling feelings. We've gone through the facts, the legal battles, the unanswered questions, what made Daniel tick. So for our listeners, what do you think is the most important thing to take away from this?
I think it reminds us that the world can be dangerous and we need to be careful. But it also reminds us to be kind, to notice the people around us, and to speak up when we see something wrong. We might never fully understand what makes people do awful things, but we can work towards a world where those things happen less often.
That's a good point. Well, thank you for going on this deep dive with us. It's been a lot, but I think it's important to talk about these things.
Absolutely. And if our listeners take away just one thing from this, I hope it's to be kind to each other, to pay attention to the people around you, and to remember that every choice we make can change someone's life, for good or for bad.